Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am looking for our captioner and see her in the participant list, but I'm not seeing her in my grid view. So there I see her, Mary. And it is not allowing me to name you the captioner. So if you want to chat with me, Mary, and we'll make sure this is happening and make sure that you get what you need.
Okay.
Okay. So welcome to the last of our series of the Arkansas Museum Association virtual sessions. In the next couple of weeks, you'll see our announcements requesting session proposals for the rest of the year. We're going to keep doing this. And we want to hear from you about what you want, and we want your session proposals. We are going to kick off the rest of the year with a session from JAMA Best at the Arkansas Humanities Council. And on March 10th at 2 o'clock, we're going to do a webinar with her, and she's going to be talking about the Humanities Council grant programs. And they have some new things and some slightly different things, and she's going to take us through that. As many of you may or may not know, we're partnering with the American Association of State and Local History for their annual conference. So we've kind of combined the AMA annual conference with the AASLH conference in September in Little Rock, along with our virtual sessions. And we have 8 session slots to fill. And so within the next few days, you'll be getting an email about that. We want your participation, and we're excited to implement this partnership. This is a great opportunity for Arkansas Museum folks. And please note that this session is being recorded, so don't say anything too offensive, right? But it also means the recording can be sent to you after we get done here today. I want to thank our sponsors, the Arkansas Humanities Council and JAMA Best and Melanie Thornton, for their support in helping us make these virtual sessions happen. This session is being done as a webinar, so open discussion is a little hard to do, although I think I made it so that everybody can speak. And we're supposed to have closed captioning, and we have our captioner with us, but something is not going quite right with that. So we'll do our best to fix that along the way. You can put questions in the chat or in the Q&A, okay? And I'll be monitoring those while Angela's talking. So let's go to the show. Angela Gibbs is our presenter today, and she's the Curator of Collections at Jacksonport State Park. She began her career there in 2006, and her passion for history led her to a master's degree in this field, which blends well with her other interests that include reading, photography, and travel. And she's currently our secretary for the Arkansas Museums Association, but we should be clear, she does a whole lot more stuff than that. So we've been very lucky to have her as our volunteer. So, Angela, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is the captioner.
Okay. Yes.
I've been chatting quite a bit and entering text in the Q&A. I'm not sure if you're able to see any of that.
I am. I was just reading from my text, so now I'll talk to you while Angela's talking.
Okay, I'll just get back to the chat.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right. Good deal. Well, I am going to turn off my video and share my screen with y'all so we can get this started, and y'all won't see my profile the whole time. Is that showing up all right?
Yes.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, I'd like to talk to y'all about exhibit design on a dime. And what I'd like to talk about is I'm going to pretty much walk through the process that I go through here at Jacksonport. Not just tips and tricks to save you money, but it's been my experience that no matter what your budget is, good design costs time. And a lot of the things that go into a good exhibit and a good design don't really cost anything but your time. But there are some things that you can do to save some time and money along the way. And hopefully there'll be some things that you can take away and apply at your own institutions after this. So to start off, I need to go click my screen so I can advance. I want you to think critically about your exhibits and what you do and how you do exhibits. Since I started in museums, I've kind of gotten spoiled on exhibits. I'm very aware of what catches my attention, what doesn't, what I like, what I don't like. And I'm also more aware of how other people go through exhibits and what do people crowd around? What do they ignore? What tends to be broken? And if you get nothing out of today, I'd like to just start that thought process for you going of things that you can apply in your own institution. And hopefully this webinar will help you out as well. But what exhibit do you remember forever? I mean, not just, maybe just the topic, but how it was laid out, or some interactive that caught your attention, or how a text was presented, or how somebody did a quote. And next, what was your museum's most popular exhibit? What did somebody like about your site? What's something that people are still talking about? What worked, what doesn't? And sort of keep those in the back of your mind as we go through today. Now, every good exhibit starts with a plan. The majority of things I'll talk about in this section are not exactly one and done, but you can probably go through all of these in about half an hour. The things you already know, that you're already familiar with, but if you can consciously walk through them and analyze them, they'll really benefit you in the long run. For starting out, who's your audience? What's their general age bracket? Who looks you up on the web and decides that you're worth coming to? You're all worth coming to, for the record. But who decides to come and see you? Is it mostly people, retired people, out on vacation? Is it families looking for something to do on a Saturday afternoon? Is it school groups? Each of these things are going to influence how you design an exhibit and what you're going to include and what you're not. The next thing is, what do they like? What do they spend time on? What do they not? What works for your institution and what hasn't? And keep in mind that you don't need to design exhibits for one specific group, but there are going to be elements that you might not include in one or another, depending on who your audience is. If your audience are mostly over 75, having 90% of your exhibits do interactives are probably not going to be a good idea. But on the other hand, children also do read text if they're interested in it. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as well when you're designing exhibits, and it'll work to the audience that you have. Next is identify your assets. What do you have that you can bring to the table when you design an exhibit? Is it great artifacts? Is it exhibit cases? Is it your exhibit space? You can probably write these things down the back of a napkin in a shorter time than it takes me to talk about it. But just keep in mind some of these things that you can include, and what does your institution bring to the table? Also, what are your challenges? None of our exhibit spaces are perfect. None of our collections are perfect. They're all things that we're going to have to figure out how to work around or work through. And I really love this graphic because it shows that even though we do have challenges, there are ways we can overcome them.
That's not what I got
A
from
little
that.
bit. Pardon?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I was talking to myself.
Incidentally, if any of y'all have questions, Angie is going to be kind of monitoring the chat and such. So she can let me know if any of y'all have a question you'd like to ask kind of in the middle here. I'd like to talk a little bit about our exhibit spaces here at Jacksonport because I'm going to be referencing them quite a bit. These are all photos of our courthouse exhibit gallery. It changes out once a year. As you can see on the right, we have a nice big open exhibit room and no obstructions, anything like that. And we have a nice big long exhibit case. It's a permanent fixture with 3 nice bays there as well. To the left are our 2 hallway exhibits. Now, some challenges in this building are it's built about 8 feet up off or 5 feet up off the ground. So anything that comes in here has to be hauled up a set of concrete steps and loaded through a 3-foot wide door. So that's one limitation. Another one when we started out was the big 10-foot windows. I covered those up several years ago. And so the things that get on display for a year aren't damaged by light. The exhibit cases we had in here to start were massive. very heavy, and I got dirty looks from our maintenance crew every time I asked them to move them around. So over the years, we kind of overcame that by getting smaller cases and just sort of building up our collection of smaller, more portable exhibit cases over the years, and those have worked really well. Our next space is our visitor center, which opened a couple years ago. And in this building, we have 6 cases, which vary from around 8 feet wide to 18 feet wide, and range from about 15 inches deep to about 3 feet deep. Challenges in this one include 4 of the 6 are on the 2nd floor. So everything has to be hauled up either the stairs or in our rather small elevator. So that's a challenge. As you can see on the left, 2 of our largest exhibit cases cover, one faces directly east and one faces directly west. So no textiles, no photographs, no documents, but there are ways to do that as well, because as you can see, we installed some really large photographs, and those work nicely too. So to prepare for this, I got really tired early in my career of trying to figure out what would fit and what didn't, especially hauling a bunch of artifacts into a space and finding out that, oh, I didn't have enough exhibit cases, or I need to haul 3 more exhibit cases out, or it didn't lay out the way I thought. So I just took about, I think, half a day and measured out our exhibit cases, the ones in the visitor center and the ones in the courthouse. The example you'll see on the right here is of our courtyard facing case in our visitor center. And it's just a plain box, but I'll show you later how I was able to plug artifacts in there and shuffle them around before I got them in real time. And that has saved me a lot of headache. This is a mock-up of our courthouse exhibit gallery. It's to scale. And all those boxes are scale models of our actual exhibit cases. And this has been an immensely helpful tool. I use this every exhibit I do, because in an hour or even half an hour, I can lay out everything that I want to talk about and figure out what all I'm going to include and where it's going to go. And it saves a lot of time. Another thing I did was I created a list of our exhibit cases, exact dimensions, all the stands we have, how many panel supports we have, how high are the vitrines in the exhibit cases. Not that I know anything about hauling artifacts on site into our courthouse museum and then finding out that our prize artifact does not fit into the exhibit case. I would know nothing about that. That has never happened. I'm using this example about someone else. But it's very helpful. Again, it's another simple tool that I use every time I do an exhibit, and it took me about half a day to do, just to take those measurements. And it's very, very useful. Last thing in this part is make a list of the props you have. We made a lot of purchases over the years, all the way from Lego blocks to 27-foot French parachute, military surplus, which is very random. But it helps too to be able to go through that list and have to know exactly what we have on hand when I'm working on what we're going to include in our next exhibit. So now that you know kind of what you have on hand and who you're talking to and some of those parameters, let's talk about identifying your future exhibits. When I first started out, I got very tired of, we got to have an exhibit for the spring and scrambling for a topic and what have we done in the past? I don't remember. Okay, can we figure this out? And so I started out with, how often do your exhibits change? Do they change once a year? Do they change once every couple of years? When are you going to install? Our exhibits here at Jacksonport, the courthouse exhibit goes in 1st of March every year. That's the date it opens. Barring inclement weather and other circumstances, we have changed it occasionally. But that set date helps me plan like nothing else. The visitor center exhibits go in the 1st week of March or 1st week of November every year. And that also helps me plan in advance about what's coming up in the future. So as far as topics themselves, what do your visitors ask you about? What do they want to see? What stories aren't being told in your institution? Are there anything, research that you've done that you want to include in the future? Are there parts of your collection that haven't been featured before? And just sit down, either just you or your staff, depending on what your setup is, and brainstorm. Again, this took me about, I think I planned the next 10 years in an afternoon. It didn't take me all that long. And some of these are just a list of concepts. Next year is health and medicine. That's the only heading I have. I like to alternate between kind of stuff and story exhibits. Our archaeology exhibit was followed by our crime and criminals exhibit. And this just, for me, just helps vary the topics a little bit. And it's a different kind of research between one and the other. This is useful not only for planning purposes and figuring out in advance what comes next, but also it helps when I'm just doing, generic random research on another topic. And for example, I use medicine, which is the next one we have coming up. If I come across a story on medicine, I just photocopy that story or print it out or whatnot and put it in a folder. And that not only saves me time and effort in the future, but also gives me a reference bank for exhibits that are coming up as well. And it can guide future research. If you have some spare time in 2021, you can research future exhibits that are coming up. So now that you have the topic you're going to talk about, it's a good idea to come up with, for lack of a better word, a theme. So make it relevant to your site. And if you can come up with a sentence that sums it all up, that if your visitor walks away with nothing else, they'll know what your exhibit was about. Sometimes I don't develop, this doesn't gel until I'm halfway through the process. Sometimes I have it at the very beginning. I know exactly what I want to talk about. This exhibit on the right is not a very good example of this concept. When I designed this exhibit, it was the idea of matching people's biographies to artifacts in our exhibit and sort of a mystery theme. But visitors looking at this first panel right out of the gate, they have no idea what the exhibit's about. And unfortunately, this was not my best work. I'll be the first to admit that. So let me show you some examples of some better ones. Work, Fight, Sacrifice was our World War II exhibit. Everything in that exhibit had to deal with one of the topics. And as you can see at the bottom, it has a cohesive theme to it. Our steam exhibit, we have a lot of history in transportation and steam engines here at Jacksonport, both through the steamboats and through the railroads. And so learn how steam changed life in Jackson County. Somebody walks away, they know that's what it was about. One of my favorite ones is Grandmother's Gadgets. You'll hear me talk a lot about that today. It compared late 19th and early 20th century technology to the technology of today. The theme statement on that was early 1900s technology is more familiar than you think, which sums up what the exhibit is about. And having that topic in mind not only guided the research, but gave me it gives you a cohesive flow of information as well for the visitor. Now, as you're doing research, stories are vital, as you all know. Providing context is good, but in the end, this is about your site and your stories. And finding those stories is very, very important. So I'll use the Civil War as an example. Yes, you will need to include information about what caused the Civil War, who participated in it, general battles if you want to go for Arkansas or the United States, that sort of thing. But in the end, people are coming to see your site and what happened right there. So do your best to find those stories, and your exhibit will be the better for it. And if you can connect those stories to artifacts, even better, that you have on display that people can look and touch, not touch, that can see and make a connection to those, really makes for a very meaningful experience. Now, where do you find these sources? There are a lot of places to go. The Arkansas State Archives is an excellent resource for statewide history. They have photographs, they have articles, they have primary search material, they have all sorts of things. They have a very excellent website and it's searchable. I've also come to use HathiTrust recently. It's libraries from around the world have digitized their collections and placed them online. And the great thing I love about it is it's full text searchable. So I've typed in Jacksonport, Arkansas, and come up with hits in the text all the way from court cases that came before the Supreme Court to journals of a Civil War soldier that passed by here in 1862. So they have very deep shelves and it's very, very helpful. Also, the Library of Congress and the National Archives are good resources as well, both for images and information. Whenever I'm doing an exhibit, I create a physical notebook. So whatever references I find, I copy those off, print them out, put them in the notebook. Some I have only one, some I have, looking at my shelves here, probably 5 or 6. And that gives me a permanent record of the research I've done to go back to at a later date. Something else that's been helpful to me as I'm gathering information is I'll create a Word document or a publisher document. And as I find the stories, just type in the little blurbs in the, it would eventually become my text panels. And that way, when I'm looking at creating the text panels, all the information on that given topic is right there. And that's just been a useful shortcut for me as well. Lastly, choose your stories. Again, choose ones that are relevant to your site, choose ones that are interesting. And here are some examples from the Grandmother's Gadgets exhibit. And as you go through, these topics, these stories kind of coalesce into various groups, which eventually become something like this. This is the Grandmother's Gadgets exhibit. And you can see there's shopping, there's health, there's entertainment, energy, household, spoken communication. These are going to be the, topics that your stories are going to fall under. And keeping them organized really helps orient your visitor and makes it flow really, really well. And it helps them orient themselves in this space. Next thing on text panels, don't be wordy. Do not be like me in some of these exhibits. Edit some more. I found it very helpful to, once I finished writing the text, to go ignore it completely and do something else for a couple weeks if I can, and then come back to it. And I have caught more errors, more what was I thinking, more slash and burn, I had too many words in here, than I care to count. I didn't do it as much as I would have liked in the exhibit to the right. I almost guarantee nobody read to the last word of any of those panels. Better suggestion is looking to the left here, again, Grandmother's Gadgets. The text is broken up, it's high contrast, it's separated with images. Probably a lot more people read that one. So use as few words as possible to get your point across while still being detailed enough to tell the stories you want to tell. Most visitors are not going to read 90% of your text. Beverly Sorrell in her exhibit labels book talks about this some, but make sure that each panel can stand alone on its own. An activity I do on occasion is, once I've written the text, I go through and pick 5 random panels. And after reading those panels, do I still get the idea, or at least a portion of it, of the story I'm trying to tell in the entire exhibit? Does it make sense by itself, or does it need the other 5 panels around it to make any sense? So now that we've figured out what we want to say, let's figure out how it's going to look. Again, I mentioned Beverly Sorrell and Exhibit Labels. It's an excellent book. I'm pretty sure it's still in print. It's very good and very user-friendly on how to write exhibits. Bottom line on exhibit designs is your panels have to be easy to read. Personally, my kind of acid test is if I can read the smaller print from 5 feet away and the bigger print from 10 feet away, I'm doing pretty good. I'll also keep in mind, I'm not going to pull them up specifically, but keep ADA guidelines in mind. There are some guidelines, again, outlined in exhibit labels about font size and contrast, visual contrast, and those sorts of things. They'll be really handy. Give you an example of these. I've picked a random set of fonts. Which one's most readable? It's high contrast, but what if I do that, put a fancy background in the back? Makes it a little harder to read, and one of them has actually disappeared entirely. But quite simply, I can do something like that, and all of a sudden it's readable again. Very simple, very straightforward, but something to keep in mind. Another thing is watch your background. Again, these are both ones that I have done and published and put before the public, so I'm not pointing fingers at anybody but me. The font on the left is actually larger, but I find it very hard to read. I was trying to do something fancy. That one's admittedly earlier in my career, but the one on the right is much easier to read, even though it's a smaller font. And also too, notice that the text is broken up into kind of smaller chunks, and it's separated by an image as well. So that just makes it easier to read and easier flow, and it's just visually a lot more easy on the eyes. And it also makes it more likely that people are going to read more of it if it's easier to see. Next, color is your friend. I love using color in exhibits. If you look at the text panel to the right, your eye immediately goes to the color and the blue. And even though there are other colors in there, it's a really good way to catch people's attention and what you want them to see. I also use color a lot to separate the themes of the exhibit. For example, energy and household here. All the household headings are in orange, all the energy ones are in green. And it's just an instant way for people to recognize the separation in those topics. That, and it just looks really good to be able to include more color in the exhibit as well. Like in this example, the one on the right is our Civil War exhibit. Note again, way too much text. And it's visually kind of boring. It was a little less so, the text panel faded in the background, which is another thing that we had an issue with. We had a bad batch of paper, but it's not very colorful. It's not very visually interesting. But the one on the left, it immediately draws your eye to the red, and people are going to be more likely to read some of that than they are the bland panels to the right. Next thing is use images. Images are your friend. I use a lot of them, not only on their own to illustrate the point or include images from our collection, but I also use them to break up the text in big paragraphs. They're great for that. They gives the eye somewhere to rest between big blocks of words. I use a variety of things to sources for these, not only your own collection, because I'm sure some of you have fantastic images, but I also use things like Wikimedia Commons is a good one. The Library of Congress also has images. Talk to other institutions as well. The Arkansas State Archives, again, is a marvelous source for images. If there's a local institution that you think might have an image you might want to use, for example, Old Independence Regional Museum near us, I've used some of their images on occasion. There are a lot of places you can look that might have something either specifically what you're needing or something you can make work for the topic you're talking about. Very important, if you do borrow images, always give credit for them. As you notice, all the slides down here, if I use an image that isn't ours, always give credit. It's very important. Now that you have these things identified and your themes and such, take a couple minutes to figure out what the main topics are in your exhibit. This is actually a professionally done one for one of our previous sets of exhibits here at the park. And as you can see from the size of the color bubbles, those are the amount of emphasis that each topic gets. So not only as far as, do we do a big 40 by 60 panel on this, or will a little 8 by 10 do, but it also includes things like, what are we gonna spend our money on interactives for? Is this a major topic, or is this a minor topic, or do we really need an interactive at all for this topic? And it just sort of is a good exercise to go through to figure out where your resources are going to go. So now we get to put it all together a little bit. As you're planning each section, figure out what you're going to include, what artifacts, what props, how many text panels are going to be in it. Like this one, you see 4 small text panels and 1 large one. What's going to fill up the space? What's going to make it interesting? And keep in mind as you're doing this as well of not only your audience, but also making sure that you're still speaking to your story. For example, a computer museum, it wouldn't be a good idea to have only objects and text panels. There's got to be some electronic interactive because it's a computer museum. Also, it's as incongruous, I guess, to have a historic house full of 100 touchscreens. It just doesn't quite work with the stories they're trying to tell. So keep that in mind. Something else I find quite useful, I do a spreadsheet every exhibit, and I break it down by topics, by section, and include a list of, I borrowed this item from this museum for this section. I use these props, these artifacts, and it's a very, very useful tool so I can get an immediate look at what all I have, what all I need to get, what I'd like to include, things I need to borrow, and so forth. So what if we don't have what we want to put in there in our own collection? Well, it's been my experience that museums love to share with other museums. Some very good relationships with various organizations over the years. A couple of y'all are even attending this webinar. But call them up, ask if they have something in their collection that could be included. Sometimes it's something that they're not able to loan out, but at least you made a new connection as well. Check with your local contacts, see if they have things, antique pressure cooker, or someone that has a fantastic projectile point collection. Cultivate those local contacts as well. They'll stand you in good stead, not only for borrowing things, but also as a source for local information too. So now we get to some of the nitty gritty. Now that we have our text panels written and designed and they're all nice and pretty, and we know what we want to include in this and artifacts, printing costs. Yay, we're all fond of printing costs. So who do you know that can do printing? I have a working relationship with one of our sister agencies that happen to have a large format printer, and that's worked very well over the years. Do you have a local printer that's willing to donate some time and effort into the museum for the cost of materials or whatnot? If you know of another institution that does a lot of printing as well, or needs a lot of printing done, see if you can partner with them and cut some costs. For small panels, photo printers have come a long way. And depending on the size of your printer and setup, you can get some very, very good quality panels for not very much money. I recommend using high quality photo paper. Matte is probably best to avoid the glare, and printing at a high resolution. 300 dpi is best. You can do 150 if you have to. That works really well.
Hey,
For larger
Angela, I want to ask you real quick
Sure.
about the high quality photo paper. And
Yeah.
if people want to put this in the chat, they can, but where do you get your photo paper from? Because like Gaylord's super expensive, as we all know.
Yeah, I don't tend to use archival suppliers for much, especially when it comes to the photo paper stuff. Even stuff from Walmart will work. I personally buy it in larger quantities I bought from Freedom Paper before. I bought from Red River Paper before, but there are a large variety of online photo paper suppliers. Just whatever works best for your institution is what I'd recommend. But the gist of it is using matte paper is really good. In the past, I've even used presentation paper, but it tends to be rather too thin. And photo paper just works really well for not only fade resistance, but also holding up to the adhesives and stuff that I use for the backers. So
Okay. Well,
it's not, there's no
thanks.
real hard and fast, thou shalt use this photo paper, or thou
Right.
that shall be doomed.
But if any of you have suggestions or
Mhm.
suppliers that you use, put them in the
Absolutely.
chat and share them with all of us. We'd love to know where you're getting things from.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
No problem. No problem. For the large format panels, like I said, here at Jacksonport, we have an agreement with one of our sister agencies, but printing costs for posters have actually gotten pretty reasonable online. I looked up prices for a 36 by 48, and you can get a matte poster done for $34. You can get foam board if you partner with another institution. You can buy it in bulk. It goes to about $9, 9 to 12, depending on where you go. And $5 in spray adhesive. If you get that same panel professionally mounted and printed, again from an online source, you're paying double that. So there are a lot of things you can do to cut some corners and still get something that looks really, really good. And I mount all of our exhibits here with spray adhesive as well, and a brayer. So it's pretty straightforward. Stands and supports, there's no shame in borrowing from other people. If it comes in contact with artifacts, make sure that it's archival quality. But surprisingly enough, the acrylic stands and acrylic supports and such, I've actually found on retail suppliers for a lot cheaper than the archival suppliers. And they're the same thing. They're still acrylic bases and stands and so forth. And you can find them for much. Don't be afraid to comparison shop. This exact same image with the exact same stands I found in 3 different suppliers, and the prices were very different. So just because it's in an archival supplier, I cheat a lot, and I go shop around and see if I can find the same thing on maybe, like I said, a retail supplier, or it's a big world on the World Wide Web. So find out what it's called from the expensive place and see if you can find it cheaper on the web elsewhere. Now, there are some quality things. Make sure you're still getting a good quality product. And if it's coming in contact with an artifact, you'll want to see things like polyethylene, no off-gassing, things of that nature. Make sure it's still safe to be in contact with artifacts if that's indeed what it needs to do. If you're supporting a foam core panel, you don't need to be as concerned about that. But again, if it's coming in contact with an artifact, you're going to need to make sure that it's safe to do that. I build a lot, have built a lot in the past. This is a very pretty stand that will probably last forever from an archival supplier. It's also $300. Again, to support a small foam core panel, I'd rather spend $20 from some things I cobbled together from the hardware store. I still have, I think I made about 15 of these stands probably about 7 years ago, and they're still going strong. I changed them out with Velcro on the back of the foam core panel and the back plate for that, and they work just fine. Find affordable ways to tell your story. There was one exhibit, the STEAM exhibit, I wanted a full-size cotton bale. Well, as it turns out, those are a little hard to find. So I built one. The base of that is actually a plywood box covered in 6-inch upholstery foam and then wrapped in cotton batting and burlap. And friend of our museum actually works at a cotton gin. So I got a big person-sized bag of loose cotton and attached that to the bale. And another friend of our museum had some metal straps, and it worked really, really well. And it doesn't weigh much. If I'd been smart, I would have put wheels under it, but I didn't. So we just haul it around, but it works very, very well. Another example is I wanted for our food exhibit to let people see what different kind of churns felt like and how they operated. So it says online, the ice cream bucket on the right actually is an antique, though it's from the 20s, not from the 1860s, which would give me the horrors. The one in the middle, the originals of those are very expensive, but I managed to find one that's a modern version of that, still same design, for about 30 bucks, where an original wooden paddled one would have cost probably 150. So see if you can find alternatives that'll still work for the stories you're trying to tell. Buy it or build it. This is actually the exhibit it's currently set up here. I wanted to create a Faro board. The two images on the right are actually originals of what a Faro board and a case counter, which is the item on the top right or top left, looks like. I did not want to spend their prices, and since it was something people were going to touch, that wasn't going to be an option anyway. So I built those. You'll see the example, the case counter on the upper right. I found a set of replica playing cards, and with some scrap lumber, wire, and I think washers, I was able to mock it up for much, much cheaper. I think I paid probably all told about 30 or 40 bucks for that part of the exhibit. So again, see what you want to do, see what you want to include in design, and find out if there's a better way to build it or come up with an alternative, and you can really save some money that way. Another example of this is the shakers that archaeologists use professionally are really expensive, but in looking at the design, I was able to just build a simple wooden box and staple some wire to the back of it, some wire mesh, and the backdrop for some of the artifacts in our archaeology exhibit. Very simple, very straightforward. I'm not much of a builder, but those worked really, really well. Interactive activities. Again, keep your audience in mind. If they're mostly kids, something that involves complicated mechanisms and all that stuff probably isn't a good idea. Are you going to need to monitor it? Is it something you're going to need to walk in with your visitors and make sure it doesn't break every time they use it? Is it going to spill things everywhere? Again, none of these I would know anything about because I've never had an interactive that has gone awry. And you'll find out that that's a lie here in a minute. Not every type of activity will fit in every exhibit either. Make sure it makes sense to include that type of activity in your exhibit area for that topic. High tech isn't always, again, I'll talk grandmother's gadgets exhibit. I found an Underwood typewriter on eBay for, I think, 60 bucks. That thing got more use than anything else in the exhibit. It didn't matter people's age, nothing. I had 5-year-olds and 80-year-olds that love this thing. And it's very, very simple. For our newspaper exhibit on the upper right, I wanted a panel that talked about how difficult it was to sort type. Found some type online, found a type case online, mounted it to 2 pedestals, sort the type. It was very easy, very straightforward, and it worked really, really well. Be engaging. Interactives by their very nature are things that people interact with. Pardon me. So you want things that people can see and touch and feel. A couple examples on the left, our food exhibit. I found some napkin folding, examples of napkin folding and instructions how to do that. Archaeology exhibit in the middle, I built 4 steps and inset items into wet plaster for each of those, painted them up, and put some dirt over them. A couple buckets later and some shovels, and that's the most popular part of the entire exhibit. The newspaper exhibit in the right, selfie op. It is literally a big board with some paper over it and 2 holes cut in it. and people loved it. Another example of very low tech stuff, create some discussion, get people engaged with the artifacts themselves, try and get them talking to each other about it. The one on the left, those numbers are connected to a what is it exhibit. And I think that's pretty much what the panel says is, guess what this is. And then there was a flip panel at the end, which actually told them they could match up the numbers and find out precisely what it was. The two on the right were from our justice exhibit. I spent a series of panels talking about an actual case that occurred here in Jacksonport. And at the end of it, people got to vote. Guilty, not guilty, and if they were guilty, what should their sentence be? Very low tech, very little funds, but effective in engaging it as well. I will say that playing in the future, the tickets did get to be a bit of a mess, which is something to consider, but as a concept, it worked very well. This is one of my favorites. Talking about encouraging thinking and being engaged. Again, the Grandmother's Gadgets exhibit, I'm very fond of that. In 1900, the Ladies' Home Journal asked their readership what they thought technology would be like for the year 2000. Some of them were pretty pertinent. Electricity created by water power will completely replace coal for heating and cooking. People will watch events as they happen through broadcasts over telephone wires. Some of them were not as accurate, but I posted that panel, and immediately next to it, I posed this question: what gadgets do you think people will use in 100 years? Use the colored notes to describe them. And put Post-it notes and a couple pens. I kid you not, I emptied that panel about 4 times in the course of a year. And it was packed notes on notes on notes with people engaging with that particular panel with that one question. It was very effective. And it was neat to see what people wrote as well. Now, the concept didn't work as well for some others. Again, example of some using the same concept for different things, it doesn't always work. I asked people on the left to identify some of their family heirlooms. Very few people responded. On the other one, I asked people to identify what they thought those still unidentified parts of our collection are, and didn't get much engagement for that. So it's not universal. A good idea on one exhibit isn't always a good idea on another. Also, recycle items. On the left is our disaster exhibit. I had people build various types of things, Legos, building blocks, Lincoln logs, and see which structure would last when you shook the table. A couple years later, people were matching artifacts on that same table for another activity. So there are ways to reuse your set pieces once you build them. And you can think outside the box and figure out creative ways to do that as well. And thinking it through. Please learn from some of my mistakes. The same disaster exhibit, that tall unit to the right was a brilliant tornado machine that you could create and adjust the airflow to create a column of humidity from a humidifier about, I think that's 6 feet tall. It was a great concept. It worked really well. And we found out later it would set off the fire alarm. So we had to stop using that particular one and unplug it. The one on the right is from our archaeology exhibit. We built this shaker table that you could flip over and see the objects inside. It was very heavy and very bulky. These are 2 very classic examples of, if you think something is a very good idea, please think it to the very bitter end of how it will be used and where it will be used and for how long it will be used, and over-engineer it as much as possible. Also, with interactives, there can be too much of a good thing. And this goes for pretty much anything as far as text panels and so forth as well. Our World War II exhibit, I had so many great ideas for interactives that they even flowed into the hallway, and very few of them ever got used. So don't do that either. Now, putting it all together. Now we have the interactives we want, we have the props and artifacts and text panels, we're all set to go. Designing the layout has saved me a great deal of time. I mentioned before, putting it all together in the ups. This saved me hauling all the artifacts up the stairs and then figuring out that I had too many or too few or they didn't fit. It's just a great time saver to be able to put those up beforehand in the computer before having to do it for real. And the same goes for the courthouse as well. As you can see, we talked about that before. Also use lighting. It sounds kind of, well, simple, and it is, but make sure that when you set this all up, that your best artifact is not hidden underneath a shadow casting shelf. I will comment on this. Make sure that you're not putting your very fade sensitive artifact under the brightest lights you have either. If you notice in the dress exhibit to the right, our huge windows are covered, and the lights in this exhibit area stayed off if visitors weren't in there. So strike a balance as best you can between the sensitivity of the artifacts while still being able to highlight them so people can see all your lovely hard work. I also like to create vignettes in the exhibits. Give people sort of a visual sense of the groups of your stories and topics and so forth. And these can be quite complex. They can be quite simple. On the right, I was talking about the Victory Gardens during World War II. All that is some clay and some sticks and string, fabric, and some replica seed packets. Didn't take a whole lot to put together, but it made it more visually interesting to give people that concept of a victory garden. The one right next to it, you'll see the 27-foot French parachute that I acquired, not an artifact, it was purchased, to provide the backdrop for our aviation part of our World War II exhibit. Next, make connections. Talk about fabric, have big drapes of fabric there. Talk about cotton and commerce. They're all posted on that cotton bale. The grain grinder with the grains. Give people something to latch onto visually, and that'll strengthen your content all the more. And lastly, think outside the box. I was scrambling for a topic to do for our smaller exhibit cases in our crime and criminals exhibit, which is up now, and came up with self-defense, which is related to crime and criminals and such. And it was quite fun because for the women's self-defense, I found a list of in the Chicago newspaper, things that women had used as weapons in the course of the previous year. And so all those items you see to the lower left are things that women used in self-defense, including hat pins were quite popular. There was actually some laws passed against ladies' hat pins later on because they became such a dangerous weapon. In the upper right, you'll see one of our racing sulkies. I really wanted to do a transportation exhibit. This is actually currently on display in our visitor center. But how on earth do you put in a buggy or a sulky that size into an exhibit case that's only 3 feet deep? Well, you get some pipe and you get some padding and you hang it sideways. It is fully supported. That's what the cables are for. And it worked really well. So don't find yourself limited by your space. There are ways and solutions that can be presented where you can only take care of your artifact, but also tell a good story as well. And last thing I'd like to leave you with, a lot of this might sound like, if you're anything like me, I want to go rewrite everything I've ever written whenever I hear someone else talk about text or exhibits or exhibit design. The one on the left is the exhibit that was installed when I first started working for Jacksonport. And the one on the right as you can see, is very, very similar, is the one I installed immediately after that. So use what concepts I present today, adapt them to your own site, please. If you have any questions, let me know. I'd be more than happy to chat with you and brainstorm or whatever you would like, let you know things that have worked for me, and see if I can help you out with some of your own projects. And thank y'all very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, as I just posted in the chat a few minutes ago, would love to hear from any of you your own tips and tricks and hacks for where you find stuff for your exhibits, or any hacks you have for developing exhibits. As Angela said at the beginning, planning will save you a lot of time and money and heartache. So if you have other tricks you use too, or questions for Angela, I'd love to hear them.
Absolutely.
And also chat them if I have done something wrong in this new updated Zoom thing and muted everybody and you can't unmute yourself. So it's possible that
everyone's
happens.
on mute right now.
Yeah. I think I'll ask you this, or at the group, Angela, whoever, the foam, like finding sturdy stuff that works like styrofoam, but is safe and doesn't off gas, something that you can use for mounts and that kind of thing. And fabric, does anybody have good sources for those? I always think that's sort of hard.
I'm trying to think of, I haven't bought a lot of that in a while. I typically run a search for plank ethafoam and see what pops up, and then work from there.
Okay.
As far as the fabric, you just can't beat unbleached muslin no matter where you can find it.
Okay.
How long does it actually take for styrofoam to off gas? I mean, does it continue to do that? Because we've actually used some pool noodles to hold up our two-headed calf, and it's covered up with muslin, but we just let it air. I mean, we waited like 3 weeks before we actually put it together.
Right.
Is that?
I have heard of people using pool noodles. I haven't seen the technical specs on those.
Okay.
So I can't speak to what they're used for. Personally, I've used what's called backer rod. It's the gray stuff.
Right.
But I don't use the archival suppliers for that. I actually it's used for log
Pipe
homes.
Insulation.
Yeah, insulation, log homes, and you can buy the stuff in bulk.
Right.
And it comes all the way from, I've seen it from like a 1/4 inch all the way to, some of our dress supports have it where I think it's like 3 or 4 inches. And that's what I've used, and it's worked really, really well.
And how long do you have to wait before you can put it together with your archives? I mean, with your artifacts?
Since it's ethafoam, I would think
a
week or so.
Okay.
It's that and it's been a while since I've checked my sources, but I think backer rod is considered stable through the Audi test and various other things, so it shouldn't be very long.
Okay. I'm sorry if I missed that in the webinar. I might have been typing.
No, I didn't. I didn't even go into any of that stuff.
Good.
So you're more than fine.
Good deal.
Yeah.
I might have included it in my collections care on a dime, but that's been years ago.
Okay.
But no, I didn't go in any of that today.
So I used Uline for lots of things and got that from Jennifer Wisniewski and Diane Carlson at the Clinton Presidential Library. They had good suggestions, and so I've ended up using Uline as a supplier for, everything from paper towels to
I feel like it's gotten
all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
I feel like it's gotten expensive over the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years. Has it not?
Some of it has, but some of it's still way cheaper than Like
Kinda have to know
Gaylord
what
is
to look
always
for.
the one I think of, but some of the
Yeah.
others. Now,
Okay.
somebody just asked the question about what tools you use to cut foam board when you're mounting your posters. And I've heard lots of talk about that. So what do you do, Angela?
I have I'm a little spoiled. I will say at the outset. When this building was built, I requested forget the brand, Fisher, I think it is, but I have a big wall mount fancy mat cutter thing. So I confess I'm very spoiled in that. When I first started out, it was a razor blade and a ruler. I just used a metal yardstick and a straight razor, a utility knife. For my smaller stuff, I do have a smaller mat cutter. It's the one with the handle and the little guide, and it the guide flips up, kind of thing.
I think that's by Logan.
Logan, yes, yeah,
I have that one.
yeah. But pretty much anything you'll see in framing supply, framing supply tools, picture frame supply catalogs, those sorts of things. But I've certainly cut my fair share just using a straight edge and a razor blade. I have the scars to prove it. But something else as well, if you can get your hands on one, is a safety ruler. They come in various lengths. They're a stainless steel ruler, but they have a curved lip on them. So you can put your, posing for the camera here, you can put your hand here and your blade goes this way, and there's no way you can cut your hand, which is very nice.
Nice.
And you can find those easily online. Just, type safety ruler into any search engine. You can come up with a variety of sources for them. Again, if you order it through Gaylord or University Products, you're going to pay a fortune, but there are a variety of other places that offer those as well. So that'll save your hand. I also sometimes, not so much on foam board, but on the blue archival board, I also use a rotary cutter, like you get from fabric stores. I use one of those quite a bit too. It's a little rough on foam board though, so I wouldn't recommend it wholeheartedly for that. But it's also a good tool as well.
Also learned from Jennifer at Clinton Library to use one of the the type of utility knife that extends out. It can get longer for cutting like thicker pieces of styrofoam. Like she would like take her, like pull it out all the way and hold it up vertically and be able to cut all the way down like a 3-inch thick piece of styrofoam straight down and have and I was trying to do it with like a box cutter and doing it on one side, flipping it over and then doing it on the other, and it would be a complete mess. So that was a miracle find for me at that
So,
time.
Paige, clearly Jennifer has been a real influence here, because yes, I bought the same knife for the same process because I learned it from her. So
thank goodness for Jennifer.
yep, exactly.
And I would know nothing about the retractable utility knife thing, because I've never cut a 3-inch thick piece of board on both sides and made it look like an utter wreck. I don't know what you're talking about there.
Maybe someday we should have a session about exhibit fails of all kinds.
I just did.
Well, okay. But I mean, something where
that?
everybody tells their horror stories, the things they messed up.
Yeah. Happy to share for others' enlightenment.
Okay. Well, we appreciate that. Okay. Anybody else you want to share or tell us something that you've learned or ask a question? And I just posted a little survey in the chat a couple times, and So if you would take a minute to fill that out, that would really help us.
Can I vote for me?
Sure. Sure. Okay, well, I am not catching, unless I'm missing somebody, I'm not seeing any hands or chats or questions. So I think we'll be able to wrap it up, but I know that I don't mind telling everybody. I know it would be okay with Angela if I said this. Her email is angela.gibbs@arkansas.gov. So
Like I was gonna tell them that. So yeah, go for it.
yes, yeah. So feel free to, and apparently you need to get a hold of also Jennifer Wisniewski at the Clinton Library. And she and Diane talk about this kind of stuff all the time too.
They
But
do.
somebody, Angela, I think it was Gina, who said the Post-it notes were an especially good idea and that they were going to work on that. And I've been to a couple of museums where they use Post-it notes for interactive. And it really does work. It's so cheap and it gives you a chance to say something and you get to collect a little data anecdotally from your visitors and they get to feel like they're saying something. So I think the Post-it note thing works beautifully.
It does. It doesn't work. It's been a little bit of a mixed bag for work for us, but in the main, it's worked really well.
Yeah. Good. Okay, well, then I hope that we'll see you all on March 10th when we talk to JAMA Best. And please watch for several announcements from us in the next couple of weeks. We want to hear from you and we want your expertise. So thank you. And I will end the session. And but so glad to see all of you.